I woke up that Tuesday morning to find my grill stone cold and my propane tank nearly empty, which made absolutely no sense because I had just refilled it 3 days ago. My name is Ethan Quimby, and I had moved into the Pleasant Valley Estates in Scottsdale, Arizona about 8 months prior. The neighborhood seemed nice enough at first, with its manicured lawns and Spanish-style homes, but I quickly learned that the HOA here ran things with an iron fist. The president, a woman named Deborah Winters, was exactly the type of person you'd expect to find running an overzealous homeowners association. She was in her late 40s, always wore athletic wear despite never actually exercising, and had that distinctive haircut that screamed, "I want to speak to your manager." I stood in my backyard staring at the propane gauge, scratching my head. I had grilled some chicken on Saturday night for a small dinner party with a few friends from work. There was no way I could have used that much propane. The tank should have been at least 3/4 full, but now it was sitting at maybe 10%. I disconnected it and gave it a shake. Definitely almost empty. "That's weird," I muttered to myself. I went inside and grabbed my phone to check the security camera I had installed a few months back. The HOA had actually given me grief about it initially, claiming it violated some obscure rule about external modifications to the property. I had to show them the section of Arizona state law that specifically allowed homeowners to install security cameras for safety purposes. Deborah hadn't been happy about that. I pulled up the camera app and started scrolling through the footage from the past few nights. The camera had a decent view of my backyard, including the area where I kept my grill. I fast-forwarded through Sunday night. Nothing. Monday afternoon. Nothing. Then Monday night around 2 in the morning, I saw something that made my jaw drop. A figure appeared in my backyard, moving cautiously toward my grill. The motion-activated light I had installed kicked on, illuminating the person clearly. It was Deborah Winters, wearing dark clothing and carrying what looked like an empty propane tank. I watched in disbelief as she disconnected my tank, connected hers, and proceeded to transfer propane from my tank to hers using some kind of adapter hose. "You have got to be kidding me," I said out loud. I watched the entire 5-minute process. She was clearly experienced with this, working quickly and efficiently. When she was done, she reconnected my now depleted tank, gathered her equipment, and disappeared back into the darkness. The timestamp showed she had been there from 2:14 to 2:19 in the morning. I saved the footage to my phone and my laptop, making sure I had multiple copies. This was insane. The HOA president was literally stealing from me, and not just anything, but propane, which was actually pretty dangerous to be transferring in the middle of the night in someone's backyard. I sat at my kitchen table drinking coffee and trying to decide what to do. I could confront her directly, but something told me that would be a mistake. People like Deborah didn't respond well to being challenged, especially when they were caught red-handed. I could call the police, but would they even care about stolen propane? Then it hit me. This wasn't just theft. This was potentially a serious safety violation involving flammable gas. I pulled up the Scottsdale City website and found the number for the fire marshal's office. It was only 7:30 in the morning, so I'd have to wait a bit, but this seemed like exactly the kind of thing they'd want to know about. Unauthorized propane transfers could be dangerous, and doing it on someone else's property without their knowledge or consent had to violate multiple fire codes. At 8 o'clock sharp, I called the fire marshal's office. A woman answered on the third ring. "Fire marshal's office, this is Patricia speaking." "Hi, my name is Ethan Quimby. I need to report what I think is a fire safety violation involving propane tanks." "What kind of violation, sir?" I have security camera footage of someone coming onto my property in the middle of the night and transferring propane from my tank to theirs. I'm concerned about the safety implications." There was a pause. "You have video evidence of this?" "Yes, madam. Crystal clear footage with a timestamp." "Can you come down to the office today? I think Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez will want to see this. This is actually quite serious." We set up an appointment for 10 o'clock. I spent the next hour getting ready and putting together all my documentation. I printed out screenshots from the video, made sure the full footage was accessible on my phone, and gathered my propane receipts showing when I had purchased and filled the tank. The fire marshal's office was in a municipal building downtown. I arrived 15 minutes early and waited in a small lobby with uncomfortable plastic chairs and outdated magazines. At exactly 10 o'clock, a man in his mid-30s wearing a uniform shirt came out to greet me. "Mr. Quimby, I'm Deputy Fire Marshal Carlos Rodriguez. Please come with me." He led me to a small office with a desk, 2 chairs, and a computer. We sat down and he pulled out a notepad. "Patricia mentioned you have footage of an unauthorized propane transfer." "Yes, sir." I pulled out my phone. "This happened last night around 2 in the morning in my backyard." I played him the video. His expression grew increasingly serious as he watched. When it finished, he asked me to play it again. "You know this person?" he asked. "Unfortunately, yes. That's Deborah Winters. She's the president of my HOA." His eyebrows went up. "Your HOA president is stealing propane from you, apparently so. Can you send me that footage?" "Absolutely." I sent him the video file via email. He watched it a third time on his computer, pausing at several points. "Mr. Quimby, this is actually a serious matter. What she's doing here violates several fire codes. First, propane transfers are supposed to be done by certified personnel at authorized locations. Second, doing this on private property without the owner's knowledge or consent creates a liability issue. Third, doing it in the middle of the night suggests she knows it's wrong. And fourth, if something had gone wrong during this transfer, if there had been a leak or an ignition source nearby, we could be looking at a potential explosion." "That's what I was worried about," I said. "I'm going to need to investigate this. I'll need your address, her address, and any other relevant information. I may need to get a statement from you officially. Are you willing to cooperate fully with an investigation?" "100%. He took down all the information, made copies of my receipts, and assured me he'd be following up on this immediately. As I was leaving, he said something that made me feel vindicated. "You did the right thing bringing this to us." A lot of people don't realize that improper handling of propane is a legitimate public safety concern. We take this stuff very seriously. I drove home feeling a mix of satisfaction and nervousness. I had no idea how Deborah would react when the fire marshal showed up at her door, but I was certain it wouldn't be pretty. I also knew that this would probably make my life in the HOA more difficult, but I couldn't just let her get away with stealing from me. That afternoon, I was working from home when my doorbell rang. I checked the camera and saw Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez and another official-looking person in a different uniform. I opened the door. "Mr. Quimby, this is Inspector Sarah Chen from the Scottsdale Police Department. Based on the evidence you provided, we're pursuing both fire code violations and theft charges. Would you mind if we took another look at your backyard and the propane setup?" "Not at all. Please come in." I led them through my house to the backyard. Rodriguez examined my grill and the propane tank setup carefully, taking photos. Inspector Chen was making notes. "Have you had any contact with Miss Winters since discovering the theft?" Chen asked. "No, I came straight to the fire marshal this morning." I haven't said anything to her or anyone else in the HOA. Good. We're going to be speaking with her today. I wanted to let you know that there's a possibility she may become confrontational with you after we contact her. If she does, please document everything and contact us immediately. Will do. They spent about 20 minutes in my yard, documenting everything. Rodriguez explained that he'd be issuing citations for the fire code violations. And Inspector Chen said they'd be moving forward with theft charges, since the value of the stolen propane, combined with the trespassing aspect, made it more than a simple misdemeanor. After they left, I tried to focus on work but found it impossible. I kept checking my security camera feeds, half expecting Deborah to show up screaming at my door. Instead, around 3 in the afternoon, I got an email to all residents from the HOA. My stomach sank as I opened it. Dear Pleasant Valley Estates residents, it has come to our attention that certain residents are installing surveillance equipment that may be capturing images of neighboring properties and common areas. This is a violation of Section 7.3 of our CC and Artiques regarding privacy. All external surveillance cameras must be registered with the HOA and positioned in a way that only captures the homeowner's own property. Violations will be subject to fines of $500 per day until the violation is corrected. Deborah Winters, HOA President. I couldn't believe it. She didn't know yet that I had reported her to the authorities, which meant this was just her ongoing campaign against security cameras in general. The timing was almost funny. I checked my camera positioning. It was aimed squarely at my own backyard. It might catch a glimpse of the fence line I shared with neighbors, but that was unavoidable and well within legal bounds. I drafted a response email, keeping it professional. Deborah, my security camera is positioned to monitor my own property only and complies with all applicable Arizona state laws regarding home security. As per Arizona Revised Statutes Section 33-1808, HOAs cannot prohibit security devices including cameras. I will not be registering my camera with the HOA as there is no legal requirement to do so. Ethan Quimby. I sent it before I could second-guess myself. Within 5 minutes, my phone rang. It was a number I recognized as Deborah's. I let it go to voicemail. She didn't leave a message. She called back twice more over the next hour. I didn't answer. Around 5 o'clock, there was a knock at my door. I checked the camera and saw Deborah standing on my porch, arms crossed, looking furious. I decided not to answer. She knocked again, harder this time. Mr. Quimby, I know you're home. I can see your car in the driveway. We need to discuss your flagrant violation of HOA rules. I remained silent. After a minute, she left, but not before looking directly at my security camera with an expression of pure hatred. 2 hours later, Inspector Chen called me. Mr. Quimby, just wanted to give you a heads up. We spoke with Miss Winters this afternoon. She denied everything initially, but when we showed her the video footage, she changed her story. She's claiming it was a misunderstanding and that she thought you had given her permission to borrow propane. That's absurd. Why would I give her permission to sneak into my yard at 2 in the morning? That's what we said. She's been cited for fire code violations, and we're moving forward with theft and trespassing charges. The fire code violations alone carry fines up to $2,000. She's also been ordered to cease any propane transfers and to have her equipment inspected. She seemed pretty upset when we left. She came to my house trying to confront me about my security camera. Did she threaten you? No, but she tried to get me to answer the door. I didn't engage. Smart. Keep documenting everything. If she retaliates against you through the HOA, that could actually support additional charges of harassment. After hanging up, I ordered dinner and tried to relax, but I had a feeling this was far from over. I was right. The next morning, I found a certified letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA, formally notifying me of fines totaling $1,500 for various alleged violations: unauthorized security equipment, failure to register modifications, and my personal favorite, disturbing the peaceful enjoyment of neighbors through surveillance activities. I photographed the letter and emailed it to Inspector Chen with a note: "The retaliation has begun." She called me within an hour. "This is helpful, actually. She's digging herself deeper. Don't pay these fines. I'm going to have our legal department look at this." In the meantime, we've got a court date set for her arraignment next week. You'll need to be there as the complainant. The next few days were tense. I got 3 more threatening letters from the HOA, each one escalating the fines and threatening liens on my property. I forwarded everything to Inspector Chen and also contacted a real estate attorney named Marcus Webb, who specialized in HOA disputes. Marcus was a sharp guy in his 50s who had seen it all. We met at his office in downtown Scottsdale. "Mr. Quimby, what you're experiencing is classic HOA retaliation, and it's illegal in Arizona. The fact that it's directly tied to you reporting criminal activity makes it even worse for them. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to send a cease and desist letter to your HOA board, not just Deborah Winters but all the board members, informing them that you're represented by counsel and that any further retaliatory actions will result in a lawsuit. We'll also be filing a complaint with the Arizona Department of Real Estate, which oversees HOA conduct. How much is this going to cost me? Let's start with a flat fee of $3,000 for the initial work. If this goes to actual litigation, we'll discuss further." But honestly, most of the time a strongly worded letter from an attorney is enough to make HOA boards back down. They're usually operating on dues from homeowners and don't have big legal budgets. They definitely don't want to lose a lawsuit that could cost them tens of thousands in damages and attorney fees. I agreed and signed the retainer. Marcus got to work immediately. That Friday, Deborah held an emergency HOA board meeting. I wasn't invited, but my neighbor Tom, who lived 2 houses down and was generally a reasonable guy, texted me about it. "Dude, the meeting was wild. Deborah tried to get the board to approve legal action against you for the camera and for defaming her character by reporting her to authorities. 2 of the other board members actually pushed back hard. They said they didn't want any part of this and that it sounded like you were within your rights." Deborah lost it and started yelling. One board member resigned on the spot. This was interesting. The board was fracturing. The following Monday was Deborah's arraignment. I took the morning off work and headed to the Scottsdale City Court. It was my first time in a courtroom, and I was nervous despite knowing I hadn't done anything wrong. Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez was there, along with Inspector Chen and a city prosecutor named Jennifer Martinez. We met briefly in the hallway before the hearing. "Miss Winters has been charged with 1 count of theft, 1 count of trespassing, and 3 counts of fire code violations," Martinez explained. "The fire code violations are civil matters that will be handled separately, but the theft and trespassing are criminal misdemeanors. She's hired an attorney, James Caldwell. He's going to push for a plea deal." "What kind of plea deal?" "Probably diversion program, no jail time, restitution to you for the propane and probation. It's a first offense and the amount stolen isn't huge. But she'll have a record and there will be consequences." We went into the courtroom. It was smaller than I expected, with maybe 20 seats in the gallery. Deborah was already there with her attorney, a balding man in an expensive suit. She glared at me as I walked in but didn't say anything. The judge, a stern-looking woman named Judge Patricia Holloway, called the case. Deborah stood with her attorney. "Miss Winters, you're charged with theft and criminal trespassing. How do you plead?" her attorney spoke up. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter a plea of not guilty at this time, and we'd like to request a conference with the prosecution to discuss potential resolution." "Very well. Defendant is released on her own recognizance. Next court date is set for 3 weeks from today. Bailiff will give you the date." It was over in less than 5 minutes. As we filed out, Deborah's attorney approached me in the hallway. "Mr. Quimby, I'm James Caldwell, representing Miss Winters. I'd like to discuss the possibility of settling this matter. I'm not the one prosecuting her." "That's the city." "I understand, but as the victim, your input matters. If you were willing to say you'd been made whole, it could influence the prosecutor's approach. What are you proposing?" "My client is willing to pay full restitution for the propane, plus an additional $500 for your inconvenience. She'll also resign from the HOA board. In exchange, we'd ask that you support a diversion program that would keep this off her record." I looked at Inspector Chen, who had walked up during the conversation. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course," Caldwell said, handing me his card. "Please let me know by the end of the week." Outside, Inspector Chen and I talked. "What do you think?" I asked. "It's up to you. The criminal case will probably result in something similar anyway. If she's willing to resign from the HOA, that might solve your bigger problem. But there's still the harassment and retaliation issues to consider. My attorney is dealing with those separately." "Then it might be worth considering. Talk to your attorney first, though." I called Marcus from my car. He listened to the proposal. "Here's my take," he said. "Don't agree to anything until we've resolved the HOA retaliation issues. If Deborah resigns from the board, great, but we need to make sure all those bogus fines are rescinded and that there's no further action against you. Let me reach out to Caldwell and coordinate. We can potentially resolve everything at once." "That sounds good." Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus worked his magic. He negotiated with both Caldwell and the remaining HOA board members. The board was actually eager to make this go away. With Deborah facing criminal charges, they were worried about the HOA's liability and reputation. The final agreement was comprehensive. Deborah would resign from the HOA board immediately. All fines against me would be rescinded. The HOA would issue a formal apology and clarification that security cameras were permitted. Deborah would pay me $800 in restitution, which covered the propane, my time off work, and my initial attorney consultation. She would enter a pre-trial diversion program for first-time offenders, which meant if she completed community service and probation successfully, the charges would eventually be dismissed. The fire code violations would still stand, and she'd pay those fines to the city. Additionally, and this was Marcus's brilliant addition, Deborah had to sign an agreement that she wouldn't run for the HOA board again for at least 5 years and would have no role in any HOA decisions regarding my property. I signed off on the agreement. It wasn't perfect, but it resolved everything and let me get back to my life without constant harassment. The formal signing took place at Marcus's office. Deborah showed up looking defeated, her usual confidence completely gone. We didn't speak directly. Our attorneys handled everything. As she was leaving, she paused at the door and looked back at me. "I hope you're satisfied," she said bitterly. "I just wanted to grill in peace," I replied. "You made this into something it never needed to be." She left without another word. Marcus walked me out after she was gone. "Congratulations. You handled this exactly right. You documented everything, you followed proper channels, you didn't engage emotionally, and you got a good resolution. A lot of people would have either confronted her directly and made it worse, or just let it go and continued being victimized. Thanks for your help. I couldn't have done this without you. One more piece of advice: stay active in your HOA. Go to meetings. Pay attention to what's happening. Boards like that need reasonable people involved to keep them from going off the rails. You don't have to join the board, but be present. I promised I would. The following week, the HOA held a special meeting to elect a new president. I attended, along with about 30 other residents. Tom was there, as were several other neighbors I'd gotten to know. The meeting was surprisingly civil. A woman named Rachel Morrison, who was already on the board and seemed reasonable, was elected president. She gave a short speech about wanting to make the HOA more focused on actual community improvement and less on nitpicking and power trips. After the meeting, several neighbors came up to thank me. Apparently, word had gotten around about what Deborah had done, and a lot of people were relieved she was gone. One older couple, the Hendersons, told me they'd nearly sold their house and moved because of Deborah's constant harassment over minor issues. She fined us 4 times in 1 year, Mrs. Henderson said. Once because our grass was a 1/4 inch too long. Can you imagine? We're just glad someone finally stood up to her. It felt good to know I wasn't the only one who'd been affected. Over the next few months, life in Pleasant Valley Estates improved dramatically. Rachel and the new board focused on actual issues like fixing the community pool, organizing neighborhood events, and addressing drainage problems in the common areas. The nitpicky fines and constant surveillance of homeowners stopped. I refilled my propane tank and installed a small lockable cage around it, just in case. I also upgraded my security camera system, adding a camera at the front of the house. No one from the HOA said a word about it. Deborah finished her community service and probation. I'd see her occasionally around the neighborhood. She never acknowledged me, which was fine by me. I heard through the grapevine that she was thinking about moving, but as of 6 months after the incident, she was still there, just keeping a very low profile. One Saturday afternoon in early March, I was grilling steaks in my backyard. Tom came over with a 6-pack of beer. "Man, remember when you thought this neighborhood was going to be quiet and boring?" he said, laughing. "I should have known better. There's always drama somewhere." True. But hey, at least you got a good story out of it. And you saved the rest of us from Queen Deborah's reign of terror. We clinked our beer bottles together and enjoyed the perfect Arizona evening. My propane tank was full. My grill was hot. And for the first time since moving in, I felt like I could actually relax in my own backyard without worrying about some HOA violation or midnight propane thief. The ironic thing was that the security camera that Deborah had fought so hard against was what ultimately caught her in the act. If she just left well enough alone, instead of trying to control every aspect of the neighborhood, she could have stayed in power, and I would have been none the wiser about the propane theft. Her need to micromanage everything is what led to her downfall. A few weeks later, I got a check in the mail from Deborah for the full $800. There was no note, no apology, just the check. I deposited it and used part of the money to buy a really nice new set of grilling tools. The rest went into my emergency fund. The HOA drama had taught me a valuable lesson about standing up for yourself when someone is clearly in the wrong, even if that person is in a position of authority. It had also taught me the importance of documentation. Without that security camera footage, it would have been my word against hers, and as HOA president, she probably would have won. Inspector Chen called me one more time about a month after everything was settled. I wanted to let you know that Deborah successfully completed her diversion program. The charges will be dismissed in 90 days, assuming she doesn't get into any more trouble, but the fire code violations are permanent on her record. Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez wanted me to tell you that your report may have prevented a serious incident. Apparently, they investigated further and found that Deborah had been doing unauthorized propane transfers for over a year, not just from you but from at least 2 other neighbors who had also noticed their tanks depleting faster than expected. You're kidding. Nope. When they confronted her about it during the investigation, she admitted to it. Said she was having financial problems and couldn't afford to keep refilling her tank, so she just took a little from neighbors here and there. The other neighbors didn't have camera footage, so they just thought they were using more propane than they realized. That's crazy. So I wasn't even the first victim. Not by a long shot, but you were the first one to catch her and report it. So thank you again for bringing this to our attention. After that call, I felt even better about how I'd handled everything. This wasn't just about me being petty or getting revenge. It was about stopping someone who was genuinely doing something dangerous and wrong. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. The new HOA board was reasonable and responsive. When I had a legitimate concern about a broken streetlight near my house, they had it fixed within a week. When I wanted to plant some new trees in my front yard, I submitted the request as required, and it was approved within 2 days with no hassle. This was what an HOA was supposed to be like. A group of neighbors working together to maintain property values and quality of life, not a petty dictatorship run by someone on a power trip. I even ended up joining the HOA's social committee, helping to organize a neighborhood barbecue that summer. It was a huge success, with over 50 families attending. We set up grills in the common area, and everyone brought side dishes. Kids played in the pool while adults mingled and got to know each other better. Rachel, the new HOA president, gave a short speech thanking everyone for coming and emphasizing the importance of community. She made a point of saying that the HOA existed to serve the residents, not the other way around. People actually applauded. Deborah didn't attend the barbecue. I wasn't surprised. The whole experience had been stressful while it was happening, but looking back, I was glad it had played out the way it did. I'd learned a lot about standing up for myself, about the importance of following proper procedures, and about the value of having good documentation when dealing with disputes. I'd also learned that HOAs could be a force for good when run by reasonable people, but they could become toxic quickly when someone like Deborah got control. It made me more aware of local governance issues and more willing to stay involved to prevent future problems. My advice to anyone dealing with a similar situation would be simple. Document everything, follow proper legal channels, don't engage emotionally with the person causing problems, and get professional help when needed. I could have easily made the situation worse by confronting Deborah directly, or by posting about it on social media, or trying to handle it myself. Instead, I let the proper authorities do their jobs, and the system worked. One evening about a year after the whole incident, I was sitting on my back patio enjoying a beer after work when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom. "Did you hear? Deborah is moving. House goes on the market next week." I felt a small sense of satisfaction, but also a bit of relief. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because it meant a complete end to that chapter. Someone new would move in, hopefully someone who would be a good neighbor, and the neighborhood could continue healing from the drama. "Can't say I'm sorry to see her go," I texted back. "Nobody is, trust me." The for sale sign went up the following Monday. I watched from my living room window as the real estate agent hammered it into her front lawn. It stayed up for about 6 weeks before a sold rider was added to it. I never found out where Deborah moved to, and I didn't ask. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, but I doubted it. People like that rarely changed. The new neighbors who moved into her house were a young couple with a toddler. Their names were Chris and Amanda, and they were friendly from day one. When I welcomed them to the neighborhood and mentioned I lived 3 houses down, Amanda laughed. "Oh, you're the propane guy. The real estate agent told us the story. That's actually hilarious. Don't worry, we have our own propane tank and we'll keep it locked up." It was strange being known as the propane guy, but I suppose there were worse reputations to have. The HOA continued to function smoothly under Rachel's leadership. Property values in Pleasant Valley estates actually increased over the next year, partly because the neighborhood had become more desirable with the improved management. Several houses sold quickly, and new families moved in, all of whom seemed happy to be there. I eventually did join the HOA board myself, taking on the role of treasurer. It wasn't a position I'd ever imagined myself in, but after everything that had happened, I felt a responsibility to help ensure the HOA stayed on the right track. Plus, Tom joined as secretary, so at least I'd have an ally and a friend in the meetings. Our first few board meetings were refreshingly boring in the best way possible. We discussed budgets, approved routine maintenance requests, and planned community events. There was no drama, no power trips, no ridiculous fines over minor infractions. It was exactly what an HOA should be. At one meeting about 18 months after the propane incident, we were reviewing the year's finances when Rachel brought up an interesting point. "You know, our legal fees are down about 80% compared to when Deborah was president. She was constantly getting us into disputes with homeowners, and it was costing the HOA thousands of dollars a year in attorney fees. This year we've spent maybe $500 total on legal matters, and that was just for routine document reviews." Tom chimed in. "Our insurance premiums also went down. Apparently, we were considered high risk because of all the complaints and disputes under the previous administration." It was eye-opening to see the actual financial impact of Deborah's mismanagement. It wasn't just about the interpersonal conflicts and the stress she caused. Her behavior had been costing every homeowner in the community real money through higher dues and fees. We voted to use some of the savings to upgrade the community playground and to resurface the tennis courts, both of which had been neglected for years. The improvements were completed that spring, and the neighborhood kids were thrilled. My life had returned to normal, or rather, to a better version of normal than I'd experienced when I first moved in. I could grill whenever I wanted without worrying about my propane mysteriously disappearing. I could maintain my security cameras without harassment. I could enjoy my property without constant HOA violations being threatened. The security camera that had captured Deborah's nighttime theft remained in place, still recording. It had captured plenty of boring footage since then. Me grilling, occasional wildlife wandering through the yard, and one memorable incident where a monsoon storm knocked over my patio furniture. But I kept it running because it provided peace of mind. Sometimes I'd think about that night when Deborah snuck into my backyard at 2 in the morning to steal propane. What had she been thinking? Did she really believe she wouldn't get caught? Or had she become so used to getting away with abusing her power that she thought she was untouchable? I'd never know the answers to those questions, but it didn't really matter anymore. What mattered was that the situation had been resolved, justice had been served, and the neighborhood was better off because someone had finally stood up to her. Looking back on the entire experience, from discovering my empty propane tank to watching Deborah's house sell to new owners to serving on the HOA board myself. I realized that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be a victim. Not in an aggressive or confrontational way, but by calmly and methodically using the proper channels to address wrongs. The fire marshal's office had taken my complaint seriously because it was a legitimate safety concern. The police had pursued charges because there was clear evidence of a crime. My attorney had been able to stop the HOA retaliation because there were laws protecting homeowners from exactly that kind of abuse. The system had worked because I'd trusted it and followed the proper procedures. If I'd confronted Deborah directly, it probably would have turned into a he said, she said situation with no resolution. If I'd posted about it on social media, she could have sued me for defamation. If I'd tried to take revenge in some way, I would have been the one facing charges. But by staying calm and letting the authorities handle it, everything had worked out about as well as it could have. On a warm evening in late April, almost 2 years after the incident, the HOA held its annual meeting at the community center. About 40 homeowners attended, which was a record. Rachel gave her report on the state of the association, highlighting the improvements we'd made and the positive feedback we'd been receiving from residents. During the open forum portion of the meeting, an older gentleman named Harold who lived near the community entrance stood up. "I just want to say that this is the best the neighborhood has looked and felt in the 10 years I've lived here. I actually look forward to coming home now instead of worrying about what citation I'm going to find in my mailbox. Thank you to the current board for bringing sanity back to this community." Several other residents voiced similar sentiments. It felt good to be part of something positive. After the meeting, as people were mingling and eating the cookies someone had brought, a woman I didn't recognize approached me. She introduced herself as Nancy, and she just moved into the neighborhood the previous month. "I heard about what happened with the previous HOA president," she said quietly. "I just wanted to thank you for dealing with that. I almost didn't buy my house because when I was researching the neighborhood, I found complaints online about the HOA. But then I saw more recent posts saying things had improved dramatically, so I took a chance. I'm glad I did." "That's good to hear. Welcome to the neighborhood. Can I ask you something? The security camera you have, I was thinking about getting one too. Did you really have that much trouble with the HOA about it?" "Initially, yes. But Arizona law is very clear that HOAs can't prohibit security devices. As long as your camera is on your own property and primarily recording your own property, you're fine. I can give you the statute number if you want." "That would be great." I pulled out my phone and sent her the relevant Arizona revised statute section. It occurred to me that I'd become the neighborhood's unofficial expert on dealing with HOA issues and security cameras. It was a weird niche, but I was happy to help. As I drove home that night, I felt a sense of contentment that had been missing when I first moved to Pleasant Valley Estates. The neighborhood had lived up to its name. It really was a Pleasant Valley now, free from the tyranny of an out-of-control HOA president. My propane tank was full, locked safely in its cage. My grill was clean and ready for the weekend. My security cameras were running smoothly, keeping watch over my property. And my relationship with the HOA had gone from adversarial to collaborative. It was everything I'd hoped for when I first bought the house. And it had only been possible because I'd refused to be intimidated when someone in authority decided to abuse their power. The story of Deborah and the stolen propane had become something of a legend in Pleasant Valley Estates. New residents heard about it and took it as a cautionary tale about what happens when HOA boards forget they're supposed to serve the community, not rule over it. It was also a reminder that sometimes the smallest incident, a depleted propane tank, could expose much larger problems that had been festering beneath the surface. Several months later, I was at a city council meeting advocating for better streetlights in our area when I ran into Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez. He recognized me immediately. "Ethan, right? The propane case." "That's me. How are you?" "Good, good." "Hey, I wanted to let you know that your case actually led to some changes in how we handle propane complaints. We take them a lot more seriously now and have a faster response protocol. We've caught 3 other people doing unauthorized transfers since then." "Wow, I had no idea it was that common." "It's not super common, but it happens more than people think. Usually it's financial desperation. Sometimes it's just people who think they can get away with it. But your case really highlighted how dangerous it can be. One spark, one leak, and you could have had a serious fire or explosion in your backyard while you were sleeping." That thought sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't really considered the worst-case scenario at the time, but he was right. Deborah's selfish actions could have resulted in tragedy. As summer approached and grilling season kicked into high gear, I found myself appreciating my backyard setup more than ever. I hosted several cookouts, and they became regular events that neighbors looked forward to. Tom always brought beer. Chris and Amanda from Deborah's old house brought their famous potato salad, and various other neighbors contributed dishes. At one particularly memorable barbecue in July, someone jokingly asked if anyone needed to borrow propane. The whole group burst out laughing. Even new residents who'd only heard the story secondhand found it funny. It had become one of those neighborhood stories that would probably be told for years. Life in Pleasant Valley Estates had found its rhythm. The HOA functioned quietly and efficiently in the background, maintaining common areas and enforcing reasonable rules without the drama and pettiness that had defined it under Deborah's leadership. Property values continued to rise. The neighborhood attracted good families who wanted a well-maintained community without the horror stories that sometimes accompanied HOA living. I continued serving on the board for another year before rotating off to let someone else have a turn. By that point, the culture of the HOA had changed so much that I felt confident leaving it in good hands. My successor was a retired school teacher named Margaret who had a gift for bringing people together and solving problems diplomatically. The security camera in my backyard kept recording, capturing the peaceful routine of my life. Morning coffee on the patio, evening grills with friends, occasional visits from my parents who drove up from Tucson. Normal, boring, wonderful life. The propane cage remained locked, though I doubt anyone would try to steal from me again. The story was too well known in the neighborhood, and Deborah's downfall served as a warning to anyone who might consider similar behavior. 3 years after the incident, I was at the grocery store when I saw Deborah in the produce section. We made eye contact for a brief moment. She looked older, tired. I nodded politely and kept walking. She didn't acknowledge me at all. I wondered sometimes if she ever thought about that night, about the decision to sneak into my backyard and take something that wasn't hers. Did she regret it? Did she understand how her actions had led to losing everything she'd built in that neighborhood? All the power and influence she'd accumulated as HOA president? Or did she blame me for catching her and reporting her, seeing herself as the victim of an overzealous neighbor with a security camera? I'd never know, and it didn't really matter. Her choices were her own, and the consequences were appropriate for what she'd done. As I loaded groceries into my car that day, my phone buzzed with a text from the new HOA president, Margaret. The neighborhood fall festival was being planned, and they needed volunteers to help set up. I texted back that I'd be happy to help. That's what a good HOA should be about. Community. Neighbors helping neighbors. Working together to make the place we all call home just a little bit better. Not power trips. Not petty enforcement of ridiculous rules. And definitely not sneaking around at 2 in the morning stealing propane from people's grills. The sun was setting as I drove home, casting that particular golden light that makes Arizona so beautiful. I pulled into my driveway, popped the trunk, and carried my groceries inside. Through the back window, I could see my grill standing ready on the patio, the propane tank locked safely in its cage. Everything was exactly as it should be. The nightmare of dealing with a corrupt HOA president was firmly in the past. The neighborhood had healed, improved, and moved forward. And me. I'd learned that standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means confronting someone in authority, is always worth it in the end. Not just for yourself, but for everyone else who comes after you. The story of the stolen propane had ended the way all good stories should. With justice served, lessons learned, and life returning to normal but better than before.